Good evening, good vach, and welcome to BJC Mitzvah Day number 215, part 3. Use Sefer Hachinuch mitzvah that keeps us on this way. I know it's late, but what are you going to do? You got to, I was a banim, you got the bar mitzvah, but you got to find time for Torah. I'm sorry it's coming so late, but we got to learn. Here we go. And we're continuing the prohibition to eat nossar, which is in the third book of Vayikra, Parshas Kedoshim, and the Chinuch is in the middle of talking about how really there is a prohibition to eat nossar. There's also the prohibition of pigul, where the Kohen had the wrong intention of eating past the designated time to eat his sacrificial meat. So he's saying how they're really two separate prohibitions. That's what he's talking about. The Torah itself indicates that the two prohibitions, again, pigul and nossar, should be reckoned separately by discussing the penalties for these prohibitions in two separate verses. Indeed, we find that the two distinct verses were transmitted with regard to the penalty for these prohibitions. The first is that which is written regarding pigul in Parshas Sav, which is also Leviticus, Vayikra. Quote, if some of the flesh of his feast, shlomim offering, was intended to be consumed on the third day, it remains rejected, it remains pigul. And it is written afterward in the same verse with regard to the penalty, and the soul, meaning the person that eats from it, shall bear its iniquity. This expression of bearing iniquity refers to the penalty of karas, excision. He's about to show you how. As derived from the Gemara increases through the principle of gezerah shava, sharing the same word in two different verses, from the same phrase stated in the passage regarding nossar. The Torah thus sets out the penalty of karas, excision, for the prohibition of eating pigul. And in a separate verse, it is written here regarding nossar, and whatever remains until the third day, etc., it is rejected. It shall not be accepted. Each of those who eats it will bear his iniquity for what is consecrated to Hashem. He has desecrated, and that soul will be cut off from its people. This verse sets out the penalty of karas, again excision, for the prohibition of eating nossar. Therefore, although the scriptural warning, that is the prohibition against eating both pigul and nossar, is derived from the same verse, which said, he shall not eat, for they are holy, we do not refrain on account of that from reckoning them as two separate mitzvah prohibitions, since their penalties are mentioned separately. And again, excision means either dying young, under 60, or maybe even under 50, or, God forbid, losing spiritual reward for all of one's mitzvahs, or losing one's children in their lifetime. We don't want any of those definitions. The Chinuch cites a source in the Mishnah that also indicates that the prohibition of pigul and nossar are to be reckoned as separate mitzvah prohibitions. Similarly, the sages stated in the Mishnah in Me'ilah, meat that is pigul and meat that is nossar do not combine with each other to make up the minimum amount required to transmit tumah, ritual impurity, because there are two distinct categories of prohibitions, etc. However, the principle of the nossar and pigul do not combine has certain exceptions, as set forth in the Gemara there. For there are things for which pigul and nossar do not combine, such as the aforementioned law of tumah, and there are things for which they do combine, such as minimum liability for eating. One more quick idea here, and then we'll stop. Among the underlying purposes of the mitzvah of nossar, again, leaving over meat past the time that's designated to eat, really spiritually expired meat, says the author, I've already written that which I know in the mitzvah that discusses the prohibition of pigul, which is mitzvah 144. So you see that the definition, the underlying purpose is pretty similar, but they're two separate prohibitions. Pigul, nossar. Word learning nossar. Thank you for listening to the sponsor feature Mitzvah 36-100 for the gold. Have a wonderful night.